At the glittering anniversary party she'd spent weeks planning, Emma Reynolds watched her husband of 8 years, David Reynolds, stride toward her with champagne in one hand and divorce papers in the other. But what neither he nor her stunning best friend Vanessa Carter knew was that just 2 hours earlier, Emma had unknowingly signed her late grandmother's billion-dollar inheritance contract that her lawyer had rushed over. The same contract she'd barely glanced at before stuffing in her purse to focus on celebrating their marriage. David's cruel laughter echoed through the ballroom as Vanessa, draped in designer silk that Emma's credit card had purchased, spat venomous words at Emma's curvy figure, while guests gasped and phones recorded. But the tears streaming down Emma's face weren't from heartbreak. They were from rage at the betrayal that had been brewing under her own roof for 18 months. As David publicly humiliated his wife, announcing his plans to marry her best friend, and revealing he'd drained their joint account of every penny Emma had earned from her event planning business, he made one fatal mistake. He invited Emma to their wedding in 3 months, wanting to parade his upgraded bride in front of his fat, worthless ex-wife. But what would Emma discover when she finally opened that contract? What transformation would the broken woman undergo? And what would happen when she walked into that wedding, not as the defeated, discarded wife they expected, but as something that would destroy everything David and Vanessa had built on lies? Emma's hands trembled as she held the divorce papers, the elegant script of her own handwriting visible on place cards scattered across the anniversary party table she'd decorated with white roses and gold ribbons. Around her, 200 guests stood frozen in various states of shock, their champagne glasses suspended midair, their conversations dying like candles snuffed out by a sudden wind. The 4-tier cake she'd spent 3 days perfecting sat untouched, its delicate sugar flowers mocking her with their perfection. David stood 10 feet away, his arm wrapped possessively around Vanessa, and the smile on his face was something Emma had never seen before. Pure, undiluted cruelty mixed with triumph. "Did you really think I could stay with you?" David's voice carried across the silent ballroom, amplified by the microphone he'd grabbed from the DJ booth. "Look at yourself, Emma. You've let yourself go. Vanessa here, she takes care of herself. She's what a real woman should look like." Vanessa preened under his praise, her size 2 figure perfectly displayed in the emerald dress that Emma now realized she'd seen hanging in her own closet last week. She'd thought Vanessa had left it there after one of their girls' nights. How many times had they laughed together on Emma's couch? How many secrets had Emma shared while Vanessa smiled and nodded and planned this betrayal? "You're pathetic," Vanessa said, her voice high and sharp. She stepped forward, her stiletto heels clicking against the marble floor. "Do you know how hard it was, pretending to be your friend? Listening to you complain about your marriage? Watching you stuff your face with ice cream and cake while David texted me, telling me how much he wished he was with a real woman instead of a cow?" The word hit Emma like a physical blow. She stumbled backward, her hip catching the edge of the table. Someone in the crowd gasped. Emma's mother pushed through the guests, her face pale, but Emma held up a hand to stop her. She needed to hear this. She needed to understand the depth of this betrayal so she could never, ever forget it. "We've been together for 18 months, David continued, his voice filled with satisfaction. 18 months of sneaking around while you planned your little parties and obsessed over table settings. You were so easy to fool, Emma. So trusting, so stupid." The laughter that followed came from Vanessa, bright and cruel, and several of David's friends joined in. Men Emma had cooked for, welcomed into her home, treated like family. She saw their faces now, saw how some of them had been part of the joke. Her event planning assistant, Miranda, stood near the back, her eyes brimming with tears, her hand covering her mouth. At least someone looked horrified. "I've already withdrawn everything from our joint account," David said, pulling out his phone and waving it like a trophy. "Every penny from your little event planning business, every dollar you've saved, it's gone. Vanessa and I are getting married in 3 months, and we're using your money to pay for it. Isn't that perfect?" Vanessa laughed again, then did something that would sear itself into Emma's memory forever. She walked up to Emma, looked her up and down with disgust, and spat at her feet. The saliva landed on Emma's silver heels, The shoes she'd bought especially for tonight. The shoes she'd thought would make her feel beautiful. "You're nothing," Vanessa whispered, loud enough for the nearby guests to hear. "You've always been nothing. David settled for you, but he deserves better. He deserves me." David walked over, standing beside Vanessa, and together they looked at Emma like she was something they'd found on the bottom of their shoes. "Oh, and Emma," David said, his smile widening, "you're invited to the wedding. I want you there. I want you to see what a real celebration looks like, what a real couple looks like. I want you to watch me marry a woman who actually deserves me." The room spun. Emma felt her purse sliding off her shoulder, heard it hit the floor with a thud. Papers scattered, receipts, lipstick, her phone, and something else. A thick manila envelope with her grandmother's lawyer's name embossed on the corner. She'd forgotten about it completely. Mr. Harrison had caught her just as she was leaving for the party, thrust it into her hands, said something about her grandmother's estate being finalized and needing her signature. Emma had signed without reading, too focused on getting to the venue, too worried about whether the caterers would arrive on time. Now standing in the ruins of her marriage, surrounded by people who'd watched her humiliation like it was entertainment, Emma looked at that envelope. Something stirred in her chest. Not hope, not yet, but something harder, something sharper. She bent down slowly, ignoring how her dress stretched across her back, ignoring Vanessa's snicker. She picked up the envelope with steady hands. Around her, guests began to murmur, began to move, the spell of the moment breaking. Some were leaving, pulling out their phones, already composing social media posts about the drama they'd witnessed. Others lingered, watching Emma with pity or morbid curiosity. Emma's mother finally reached her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "Sweetheart, let's go. Let's get you out of here." But Emma didn't move. She looked at David, really looked at him, and saw a stranger. How had she loved this man? How had she built a life with someone capable of this cruelty? His face was flushed with excitement, his eyes bright with malice. Vanessa clung to his arm, her expression victorious. "I'll be at your wedding," Emma said quietly. Her voice didn't shake. Something had shifted inside her. Something fundamental. "Count on it," David laughed. "Good. I want everyone to see the before and after, the downgrade and the upgrade." Emma turned and walked toward the exit, her mother and Miranda flanking her. Behind her, she heard the party resume, heard David's voice booming as he made some joke, heard Vanessa's laughter pealing through the ballroom. The sound followed her down the hallway, through the lobby, out into the cool night air where her car waited. She didn't cry. Not yet. First, she needed to read what was in that envelope. First, she needed to understand what her grandmother had left her. And then, maybe then, she would let herself feel everything that had just happened. The apartment Emma drove to wasn't the home she'd shared with David. She couldn't go back there, couldn't face their bedroom, their kitchen, all the spaces where she'd been happy and oblivious. Instead, she went to her mother's house, the small two-bedroom cottage where she'd grown up, where the walls still held photos of her as a child, chubby-cheeked and smiling. Her mother, Patricia, made tea while Emma sat at the kitchen table and finally opened the envelope with shaking hands. The document inside was thick, dense with legal language. Emma's grandmother, Dorothy Chen, had passed away 6 months ago at 93. Sharp-minded until the end despite her failing body. Emma had loved her fiercely, had visited her every week, had held her hand during those final days. But she'd never imagined this. "Mom?" Emma whispered, her eyes scanning the pages. "Mom, look at this." Patricia came to stand behind her daughter, reading over her shoulder. Her sharp intake of breath told Emma she was seeing the same numbers, the same impossible figures. Dorothy Chen had been wealthy. Emma had known that. Her grandmother had owned a small tech company back in the 80s, had sold it for what Emma thought was a comfortable sum. Comfortable enough for a nice retirement home, for good health care, for leaving something to her children and grandchildren. But this was different. $1.2 billion, Patricia read aloud, her voice faint. "Emma, your grandmother's company, when she sold it, she retained stock options. She invested everything. She built an empire and never told anyone." The document detailed it all. Real estate holdings across 5 states, stock portfolios that had appreciated beyond comprehension, a venture capital fund that had backed 3 companies that became unicorns. Dorothy had been a silent titan, living modestly, giving generously to charity, but never flaunting her wealth. And she'd left everything to Emma, her only granddaughter, the girl who'd never missed a visit, who'd brought flowers every week, who'd sat and listened to stories about the old days. But there were conditions. Emma had to read them 3 times before they sank in. "I can't access any of it for 90 days, Emma said, her finger tracing the relevant paragraph. "It's in a trust. The Board of Trustees has to verify my identity, ensure I meet the stipulations. I have to attend mandatory financial literacy classes. I have to work with a team of advisors. And I can't tell anyone about the inheritance until it's finalized." "Why would she do that?" Patricia asked. Emma thought about her grandmother, about the stories Dorothy had told of starting her company in a male-dominated industry, of fighting for every inch of respect, of building something from nothing. She wanted to make sure I was ready. She wanted to protect me from people who might use me. People like David. The thought came unbidden, bitter. If Emma had known about this money, would David have stayed? Would he have hidden his affair, continued to pretend, all for access to a fortune? The idea made her sick. "What are you going to do?" Patricia asked gently. Emma looked at the papers spread across the table, looked at the paragraph that confirmed her signature from earlier that evening, signed just hours before her world imploded. Then she thought about David and Vanessa, about their laughter, about the wedding invitation that was really just another chance to humiliate her. "I'm going to disappear," Emma said slowly. "For the next 90 days, I'm going to become someone else, someone stronger, someone who can walk into that wedding and show them exactly what they threw away." Patricia squeezed her daughter's shoulders. "You've always been strong, sweetheart." "No," Emma said, and her voice was hard. "I was soft. I was trusting. I let people walk over me because I wanted everyone to be happy. But that Emma is gone. David and Vanessa killed her tonight. What's left is going to make them regret everything." The transformation began the next morning. Emma woke in her childhood bedroom, surrounded by posters of bands she'd loved in high school, and made a list. It filled 3 pages, front and back, every item a step toward the person she needed to become. She wasn't doing this for revenge alone, though revenge was certainly part of it. She was doing it for herself, for the woman she should have been all along. First, she called Mr. Harrison, her grandmother's lawyer. He was a man in his 70s, dignified and kind, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. They met in his office, a space filled with leather-bound books and the smell of old paper. "Your grandmother spoke of you often," Mr. Harrison said, pouring Emma a cup of coffee. "She was very proud of you, especially your business. She said you had a gift for making people feel special, for creating moments of beauty." Emma felt tears prick her eyes. "I wish she'd told me about this, about the money." "She wanted you to earn your success first," Mr. Harrison explained. "She worried that knowledge of the inheritance might change you, might make you dependent or a target. Dorothy was a remarkable woman, but her wealth made her lonely. People wanted things from her. She wanted you to build your own life first, to know who you were before the money complicated things." "It's too late for that," Emma said bitterly. "My husband just left me. He drained our bank account and he's marrying my best friend." Mr. Harrison's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "I'm sorry, but perhaps the timing, while painful, is fortuitous. You now know exactly who David is, what he's capable of. Better to learn it now than after you'd inherited, when you'd never be sure of anyone's motives." The words were cold comfort, but Emma understood the truth in them. "What do I need to do? For the trust?" "You'll attend 6 weeks of intensive financial education," Mr. Harrison said, sliding a folder across his desk. "It's comprehensive. Investment strategies, tax law, estate planning, everything you need to manage your inheritance responsibly. You'll also work with a team I've assembled, a financial advisor, an attorney, an accountant, and a personal security consultant. Your grandmother insisted on the latter. Wealth brings attention, not all of it welcome." Emma opened the folder, seeing schedules, names, credentials. These were experts, people at the top of their fields. When do I start? Tomorrow, if you're ready. The classes are held at a private facility upstate. You'll live there for the duration. Think of it as an intensive retreat. No contact with the outside world except for emergencies. Your grandmother believed in total immersion. 6 weeks away from everything. 6 weeks where David wouldn't be able to find her, mock her, or parade Vanessa in front of her. 6 weeks to learn how to handle more money than she'd ever imagined. Emma felt something unfurl in her chest. Not quite hope, but possibility. I'm ready, she said. The facility upstate was a converted mansion, all soaring ceilings and tall windows that let in floods of natural light. Emma arrived with a single suitcase. Everything she'd grabbed from the apartment while David was at work. She'd left her wedding ring on the kitchen counter, left a note for the landlord saying she was terminating their lease, left everything that tied her to her old life. There were 12 other people in the program, all inheritors of various fortunes, all required by their benefactors to complete this education before accessing their wealth. Emma was the oldest at 32. The youngest was a 19-year-old boy whose tech mogul father had died suddenly, leaving him a company worth $3 billion. They were a diverse group, united by their sudden, overwhelming responsibility. The days were long and intense. Emma learned about market volatility and portfolio diversification, about the difference between liquid and illiquid assets, about how to read a balance sheet and spot financial red flags. She learned about trusts and foundations, about charitable giving and tax shelters. Her brain hurt by the end of each day, but she absorbed everything like she was dying of thirst, and this was water. But the financial education was only part of it. The program also included physical training, not to make them bodybuilders, but to teach them discipline, to show them what their bodies could do when pushed. Emma had spent 8 years avoiding mirrors, ashamed of her weight, believing David's subtle digs about her, needing to take better care of herself. Now she lifted weights and ran on treadmills and discovered that her body, while heavy, was also strong. You're doing great, her trainer, Marcus, said one morning. He was a former Marine, all efficiency and no-nonsense encouragement. You've got natural endurance. Don't let anyone tell you differently. Emma pushed through another set of squats, sweat pouring down her face. I was told for years that I was lazy, that I'd let myself go. Marcus shook his head. Whoever told you that was projecting their own insecurity. Your body isn't the problem, Emma. Your body is fine. It's the voices in your head that need work. Those words stayed with her. She began to see herself differently, not as the fat wife David had discarded, but as a woman with strength and capability. She didn't lose much weight during those 6 weeks. That wasn't the point. But she gained muscle, gained confidence, gained the knowledge that she could push herself harder than she'd ever thought possible. The program also included therapy sessions. Dr. Lauren West was a psychologist who specialized in sudden wealth, in helping people navigate the complex emotions that came with inheriting fortunes. She was patient and insightful, and she didn't let Emma hide behind anger. You're furious, Dr. West observed during their third session. That's healthy. What David did was cruel and unforgivable. But if you let that fury consume you, if you make it your entire identity, you'll never be free of him. He'll own you just as surely as if you'd stayed married. So what am I supposed to do? Emma demanded. Forgive him. Forget what he did. No, Dr. West said calmly. You acknowledge what happened. You feel the pain of it. And then you choose to move forward, not for him, but for yourself. Revenge might feel satisfying in the moment, but it's a prison. Freedom is building a life so good, so full, that he becomes irrelevant. Emma wrestled with that concept. Part of her wanted to destroy David and Vanessa, wanted to see them suffer as she'd suffered. But another part, the part that was growing stronger every day, knew Dr. West was right. The best revenge wasn't cruelty, it was living well. It was becoming so successful, so happy, that David's opinion meant nothing. By the end of the 6 weeks, Emma had changed, not just in knowledge or physical strength, but in something fundamental. She looked in the mirror and saw someone different, not perfect, not transformed into some magazine version of beauty, but powerful, capable, ready. On her last day at the facility, Mr. Harrison arrived with the final paperwork. The Board of Trustees has approved everything, he said, smiling. As of today, you have full access to your inheritance. Congratulations, Emma. Your grandmother would be proud. Emma signed the documents with a steady hand. The money was real now, sitting in accounts with her name on them. $1.2 billion. The number still didn't feel real, but the power it represented did. She could do anything, go anywhere, become anyone. The possibilities were infinite. What's your first move? Mr. Harrison asked. Emma thought about David's wedding, now just 3 weeks away. She thought about the invitation he'd sent to her mother's house, dripping with mockery. She thought about Vanessa's smug face, about the spittle on her silver heels. I'm going to attend a wedding, Emma said, and her smile was sharp enough to cut glass. The wedding preparations consumed David and Vanessa's lives. They'd chosen a venue even more extravagant than the anniversary party, a historic estate with manicured gardens and a ballroom that could hold 400 guests. Vanessa had designed everything to be perfect, every detail calculated to showcase their happiness, their superiority. Did you see Emma's Facebook? Vanessa asked one evening, scrolling through her phone while David poured wine. She hasn't posted anything in weeks. I think we broke her. David laughed. Good. Maybe she'll finally realize she needs to change her life. Though knowing Emma, she's probably eating her feelings and crying herself to sleep every night. They didn't know that Emma had deleted all her social media accounts, had disappeared so completely that even mutual friends couldn't find her. They didn't know about the facility, the education, the transformation. They had no idea what was coming. Vanessa's wedding dress cost $15,000, paid for with the money David had stolen from Emma's account. It was a stunning creation of lace and silk, designed to make Vanessa look like a princess. She tried it on multiple times, posting pictures to social media, tagging them with hashtags like #ReadyYour, Upgrade Complete, and Rijanin or Living My Best Life. Several of their friends commented, praising her beauty, celebrating the wedding. No one mentioned Emma. David had kept his promise to invite his ex-wife, sending an embossed invitation to Patricia's address. He'd even included a note, "Looking forward to seeing you there. Dress nice. We're having photographers." The cruelty was casual, thoughtless. The kind of meanness that came naturally to people who'd convinced themselves they deserved everything, and their victims deserved nothing. What David and Vanessa didn't know was that Emma had received the invitation. She'd held it in her hands, felt the expensive paper, read the mocking note, and instead of crying or raging, she'd smiled. Then she'd made some calls. "I need a dress," Emma told the personal shopper Mr. Harrison had recommended. "Something stunning, something unforgettable. Money is no object." The shopper, an elegant woman named Claire, understood immediately. "I know exactly what you need. Trust me." Emma also hired a stylist, a makeup artist, and a driver. She wasn't going to arrive at this wedding like the broken woman David expected. She was going to make an entrance that would haunt him for the rest of his life. The night before the wedding, Emma stayed in a luxury hotel suite, the kind of room she'd only dreamed about before. She soaked in a marble tub, drank champagne, and reviewed her plans with the cold precision of a general planning a battle. She wasn't going to make a scene. She wasn't going to cry or scream or beg. She was simply going to show up, let David and Vanessa see what they'd lost, and then walk away forever. Dr. West's words echoed in her mind. The best revenge is living well. Emma intended to live spectacularly. The wedding day dawned clear and bright. David woke with excitement coursing through his veins. Today he was marrying Vanessa, the woman who represented everything he'd always wanted. Beauty, status, the envy of other men. He looked at himself in the mirror, adjusting his bow tie, and felt satisfied. He'd made the right choice. Emma had been holding him back, with her boring life and her weight and her constant need for reassurance. Vanessa was different. Vanessa was a trophy. "You look handsome," Vanessa said, appearing in the doorway of his hotel room. Her hair was already styled, pulled up in an intricate arrangement that had taken 3 hours. "I can't wait to marry you." "You look beautiful," David said, pulling her close. "Emma's going to die when she sees you," Vanessa laughed. "Do you think she'll actually come? I almost hope she does. I want her to see what a real wedding looks like. "Oh, she'll come," David said confidently. "She won't be able to resist. She'll want to see if she can guilt me into feeling bad. But it won't work. I've never been happier." The ceremony was scheduled for 4 o'clock. Guests began arriving at 3, filling the estate's garden with chatter and laughter. David had invited everyone, friends, family, business colleagues. He wanted a crowd, wanted witnesses to his victory. Vanessa's family was there too, her mother preening in a lavender suit, her father looking uncomfortable in a tuxedo. At 3:30, as David stood in the groom's quarters reviewing his vows, one of the ushers knocked on the door. "Hey man, there's like 6 black SUVs pulling up to the venue. Is there a celebrity coming?" David frowned. "What?" "No, we didn't invite anyone famous." "Well, someone important just arrived. The photographers are going crazy." David's stomach tightened with unease, but he pushed it aside. This was his wedding. Nothing was going to ruin it. He checked his reflection one more time, then headed toward the ceremony site. Emma stepped out of the lead SUV, and the world seemed to stop. The dress Claire had found was a masterpiece, a floor-length gown in deep sapphire that hugged Emma's curves like it had been painted on. The color made her eyes vivid, made her skin glow. Her hair, which she'd worn in a simple ponytail for years, had been transformed into glossy waves that cascaded over her shoulders. The makeup was subtle but expert, highlighting her features without looking overdone. But it wasn't just the dress, or the hair, or the makeup. It was Emma herself. 6 weeks of training had given her posture, confidence. She walked toward the venue with her head high, her steps sure, and every single person in the garden turned to stare. "Who is that?" someone whispered. "Is that Emma?" "It can't be. Emma looked nothing like that." But it was Emma, and as she moved through the crowd, people parted like she was royalty. Her security team flanked her, 3 discreet, professional men and women who stayed close but not intrusive. The photographers David had hired to capture Vanessa's perfect day pivoted, their cameras clicking frantically at this unexpected arrival. Emma found a seat near the back, crossing her legs gracefully. She looked around at the elaborate decorations, white roses, gold accents, fairy lights strung through trees, and recognized her own signature style. Vanessa had stolen Emma's aesthetic, had copied the very elements Emma had pioneered in her event planning business. The irony was delicious. Word of Emma's arrival spread through the venue like wildfire. In the bridal suite, Vanessa's maid of honor burst in, her face pale. "Vanessa, you need to see this. Emma's here, and she looks incredible." "What?" Vanessa rushed to the window, peering out at the garden. Her mouth fell open when she spotted Emma, elegant and composed, chatting casually with one of David's cousins. "That's not possible. What did she do?" Panic fluttered in Vanessa's chest. This wasn't part of the plan. Emma was supposed to show up broken, defeated, maybe even crying. She wasn't supposed to look like that, confident and beautiful and utterly unbothered. "Forget about her," Vanessa's mother said firmly. "This is your day. Don't let that woman ruin it." But the seed of doubt had been planted. As Vanessa walked down the aisle 30 minutes later, her eyes immediately found Emma in the crowd. And Emma, instead of looking hurt or jealous, simply smiled. A small, knowing smile that made Vanessa's skin crawl. David's reaction was even stronger. When he saw Emma, his face went white, then red. He stumbled over his vows, his eyes darting to her repeatedly. How had she transformed so completely? Where had she gotten that dress, that confidence? And why did she look so calm, so unaffected by everything he'd done? The ceremony proceeded, but the joy had leaked out of it. David and Vanessa exchanged rings and kissed, and their guests applauded, but there was a strange tension in the air. Everyone was watching Emma, waiting to see what she would do. She did nothing. She applauded politely when appropriate, smiled benignly, and when the ceremony ended, she stood and moved toward the reception area with the rest of the guests. The reception was held in the estate's grand ballroom, all crystal chandeliers and marble floors. Vanessa and David made their entrance to thunderous applause, but even that felt muted somehow. Emma's presence was a weight, a silent question mark that overshadowed everything. During dinner, Emma sat at a table with some of David's distant relatives, making polite conversation. She learned about their lives, their jobs, their children. She was charming and engaged, and by the end of the first course, half the table was laughing at her stories about disastrous event planning clients. "You seem really happy," David's aunt said, studying Emma curiously. "I have to say, I wasn't sure you'd come tonight, after everything." "Life is full of surprises," Emma replied smoothly. "You never know what's around the corner." At the head table, David couldn't take his eyes off his ex-wife. She looked more beautiful than he'd ever seen her, and there was something else, an air of mystery, of wealth. Those SUVs, the security team, the way she carried herself. Something had changed, and it terrified him. "Stop staring at her," Vanessa hissed, her fingers digging into David's arm. "You're embarrassing me." "Something's different," David muttered. "Look at her. Look at how she's dressed, the way people are treating her." Vanessa followed his gaze and felt her own unease deepen. Emma was holding court at her table, and people were drawn to her, gravitating toward her warmth and confidence. Several guests who'd witnessed the anniversary party disaster approached Emma cautiously, and she greeted them with grace, as if their abandonment didn't matter. When the dancing started, Emma was invited to the floor by David's cousin, a handsome man in his 40s who owned a successful tech startup. They moved together easily, and Emma laughed at something he said, her head thrown back, genuine joy on her face. It was that image, Emma, radiant and laughing in another man's arms, that finally broke David. He stood abruptly, ignoring Vanessa's protests, and strode across the dance floor. He grabbed Emma's arm, pulling her away from his cousin. "We need to talk. Now." Emma looked at his hand on her arm, then at his face. "Let go of me, David. Not until you tell me what's going on. How did you afford that dress? Where have you been? What are you playing at?" The music had stopped. Guests were staring again, sensing drama. Emma gently but firmly removed David's hand from her arm. "I'm not playing at anything. I'm simply attending a wedding, as you invited me to do." "Bull," David snarled. "You're trying to ruin my day. You're trying to get attention, to make yourself feel important." Emma's smile was pitying. "David, this isn't about you. Not everything is about you." "Then what's it about? Where did you get the money for all this?" David gestured at her dress, her jewelry, a simple diamond necklace that, unknown to him, was worth more than he'd make in 5 years. "Did you find some desperate man to pay for you already?" The insult hung in the air, ugly and revealing. Emma felt the old hurt try to surface, but she pushed it down. This man had no power over her anymore. "I don't owe you any explanations. We're divorced. My life is none of your business." She turned to walk away, but David followed, his voice rising. "You can't just show up here looking like that, acting like you're better than us. You're nothing, Emma. You'll always be nothing." "David, stop!" Vanessa appeared at his side, grabbing his arm. "You're making a scene." But David couldn't stop. Months of guilt he'd refused to acknowledge, shame he'd buried under cruelty, all came boiling up. "I want her out of here. She doesn't belong at our wedding." "I'm leaving," Emma said calmly. She turned to address the crowd, all eyes on her. "Congratulations to the happy couple. I wish you all the happiness you deserve." The emphasis on deserve wasn't lost on anyone. Emma walked toward the exit, her security team materializing around her. David watched her go, feeling like he'd lost something important, though he couldn't say what. But Emma wasn't done. Not quite. At the doorway, she paused and turned back. "Oh, David? Vanessa? I have a wedding gift for you." She nodded to one of her security team members, who handed her a large envelope. Emma walked back, her heels clicking on the marble, and placed the envelope on the gift table. "Open it when you're ready. It explains everything." Then she left, disappearing into the night in a convoy of black SUVs, leaving David and Vanessa staring at the envelope like it might explode. They waited until the reception ended, until the last guest had left and they were alone in their hotel suite. Vanessa kicked off her heels while David poured them both vodka. His hands shook as he opened Emma's envelope. Inside were several documents. The first was a statement from the joint account David had drained, the account he'd emptied to pay for this wedding, for Vanessa's dress, for their honeymoon to the Maldives. The statement showed the balance, 0, but attached to it was a note in Emma's handwriting. "Thank you for emptying this account. It made my decision so much easier. The next document was a photocopy of a contract dated 3 months ago, the night of the anniversary party. Emma's signature was at the bottom, along with the seal of a prestigious law firm. David's eyes scanned the text, not comprehending at first. Then words jumped out. Inheritance, trust, beneficiary, $1.2 billion. No, David whispered. No, this isn't possible. What is it? Vanessa grabbed the papers, reading frantically. Her face went from confused to pale to green. She's a billionaire? The third document was a printout of recent transactions. Emma had made donations to several charities in the past week. $50 million to a women's shelter, $20 million to an organization that helped people escape abusive relationships, $10 million to a group that provided free financial education to low-income families. Each donation was made in David and Vanessa's names, with a note thanking them for teaching me the value of choosing better people to trust. But it was the last document that destroyed them. It was a legal filing, dated that morning. Emma was suing David for the money he'd stolen from their joint account, plus damages for emotional distress. But more than that, she'd filed complaints with several professional organizations that oversaw David's industry, engineering, detailing how he'd used company time and resources to conduct his affair, how he'd falsified expense reports to pay for hotel rooms with Vanessa. Attached were emails, text messages, photos, all meticulously documented proof of David's misconduct. Emma must have been collecting evidence for months, maybe even before she knew about the affair. Or maybe she'd hired investigators during those 6 weeks she'd disappeared. She's going to ruin me, David said, his voice hollow. My company will fire me. I'll lose my license. I'll never work in this field again. Vanessa looked at the charitable donations, at the millions Emma had given away like it was nothing. We could have had that. If you just waited, if you hadn't divorced her, that money would have been ours. I didn't know, David shouted. How was I supposed to know her grandmother was a billionaire? You weren't supposed to cheat on your wife at all, Vanessa screamed back. You destroyed your marriage, humiliated her in front of everyone, and now she's a billionaire and we're nothing. The fight that followed was vicious, both of them blaming each other, their perfect wedding day dissolving into recriminations and regret. By dawn, Vanessa had locked herself in the bathroom, crying, while David sat on the bed holding the documents that spelled out his ruin. Emma's revenge was complete, but it wasn't the revenge they'd expected. She hadn't screamed or cried or made a scene. She'd simply shown them the life they could never have, the person they'd underestimated, and then she'd methodically dismantled everything they'd built on lies. 6 months later, Emma stood in the office of her new company headquarters. Reynolds Events had grown from a small operation she'd run from her apartment into a nationally recognized brand. With her inheritance, she'd hired a team of talented planners, opened offices in 5 major cities, and transformed the industry with her innovative approaches to event design. But more than that, she'd used her wealth to create real change. The Emma Reynolds Foundation provided grants to women leaving abusive relationships, funded education programs, and supported small businesses owned by women and minorities. Emma appeared on magazine covers, not because of her transformation from fat wife to billionaire, but because of the work she was doing. David had lost everything, just as Emma's legal documents had promised. His company had fired him. His engineering license had been suspended, and he was working a low-level job in construction, trying to rebuild his reputation. Vanessa had left him within 3 months, unable to handle the poverty and shame. Last Emma heard, she was living with her parents, working retail and posting bitter rants on social media about gold diggers and unfair ex-wives. Emma felt no satisfaction in their downfall. Dr. West had been right. Revenge was empty. What filled Emma now was purpose, the knowledge that she was building something meaningful, helping people who'd been where she'd been, dismissed, underestimated, broken. She thought about her grandmother sometimes, about the woman who'd built an empire in silence and left it to Emma with conditions designed to protect and prepare her. Dorothy had known that wealth without wisdom was dangerous. She'd ensured Emma would be ready, would understand not just how to manage money, but how to manage herself. Emma's phone buzzed with a message from Miranda, her assistant who'd stuck by her through everything. Clients are here for the meeting. Ready? Emma looked out the window at the city stretching below her, at the life she'd built from the ashes of her humiliation. She thought about the girl who'd cried at her anniversary party and felt a wave of compassion for her. That girl had been soft, trusting, kind. She'd loved deeply and been destroyed for it. But that girl had also been strong enough to survive, strong enough to transform, strong enough to become this. Powerful, purposeful, free. Emma picked up her tablet and headed for the conference room. She had work to do, lives to change, a legacy to build. David and Vanessa were footnotes in her story now, cautionary tales about the cost of cruelty. She was Emma Reynolds, billionaire philanthropist and CEO, and she was just getting started.